Hey guys, my name is Mozzie, and recently I've been hearing a lot of concerns that both Mozzie and Gridlock are going to be overpowered when they release in Rainbow Six Siege. People are worried that their gadgets are going to have too much an impact on the game, and they're going to ruin the experience. And so what I wanted to do today is try to alleviate some of those concerns. I put a lot of time on the technical test servers, and why I don't think they're going to be nearly as overpowered as people are making them out to be, and I do think that they're going to be well balanced. And so first and foremost, I will agree that Mozzie is going to be an amazing defender. It's hard to argue that point, not only because of the weapons that he has available to him, but also because of his gadgets. If you're not aware of the way that his gadget works, basically he can fling this thing around the map. He has 3 of them, and if a drone rolls on by, it will take over said drone, and then Mozzie can use that drone however he wants. You can now drone on the defensive team. Now, the big concern I've been hearing lately about this entire dynamic is that people don't like it that you're able to take control or take away one of the most valuable tools for offense, which is their drones, and then giving it to a defensive character. That just seems like it's going to be overpowered. And while I do see where people are coming from with this argument, I think that by designing Mozzie the way that they have like this, it's going to add in some interesting dynamics between offense and defense. If they just simply gave him 2 drones to use however he wanted to, not only would this just be way too similar to Echo, I don't think there would be enough difference between those 2 operators, but also there wouldn't be any counterplay between the 2 different sides. But because you actually have to take over these drones as Mozzie, you can now work around this as long as you know what you're doing. If you and your team have identified that they are using a Mozzie, you just need to make sure and be more conservative when you are droning around. Don't just bum rush the objective. You need to be a bit more cautious about it. The same is true for a mute jammer. You're not going to rush through a doorway when you know that is nearby because of course you're going to lose access to said drone. That same kind of dynamic is true with Mozzie. And so I think that's what Ubisoft was going for when they were designing this operator. I had rounds where his gadget did absolutely nothing. Now maybe it denied a little bit of information gathering because they didn't want to go through a doorway where my gadget was situated, but that's essentially a poor man's version of a mute jammer. Like, I would have much rather had a mute on my team because at least mute would also be able to deny people getting through reinforced walls. And so overall, I actually really like the way that they designed Mozzie's gadget, and I do think that it's well balanced. Not only because it's now going to give you more ways to scout out and gather information, I think this is a really unique twist on existing mechanics to be able to get that information gathering, but also, as an offensive player, you can work around it. You can completely deny his gadget if you work around it properly, and I just think that's a really cool way at designing a character. Now, as for his weapons, though, I will admit that they are incredible, and I think this is going to be one of the reasons why people gravitate towards them. Now, I'm not entirely sure which weapon people are going to prefer. The Commando, for example, feels very similar to Jaeger's primary. It hits really hard, it has a fairly fast RPM, so you're able to put a lot of rounds down range pretty quickly, but it does have a fair amount of recoil, so you're not going to be able to have that precision compared to his other option, which is the P10. What's interesting about this weapon is that it is laser beam-like accurate, it has a very fast rounds per minute. Its damage may not be very substantial, but with that accuracy and high RPM, you're able to drop people really quickly, especially if you're able just to get a couple of rounds near their head. Because of that high RPM, you're going to be able to drop them no problem. Now, the downside of it, though, is that you only have 20 rounds to work with, so you're going to go through that very quickly. If you need to go against multiple targets, you're probably going to put yourself at a pretty big disadvantage. And so I'm really curious to see which weapon people are going to prefer when this DLC releases. Personally, I was having a lot of fun with the P10, but I was noticing myself gravitating more towards the Commando, mainly because of that high damage, but also because it has one of the coolest reload animations in the game. And so, long story short, while I do agree that Mozzie is going to be a very strong choice for the defensive team, I don't necessarily think that he's going to be overpowered. Yes, his weapons are going to be great, but he is 2 armor, 2 speed, so he's not going to be able to run around at Mach 5 like someone like Jaeger, for example. He's not going to be the best roamer compared to some of those others, but on top of that, because there is going to be some counterplay between offense and defense, I think that is also going to limit his potential. As long as you're not just throwing your drones at the objective and you're being a bit cautious about it, you're going to make his gadget obsolete. Now, as for Gridlock, I actually think she's going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum, where she might be a little underpowered. One concern I've heard people bring up is that because her gadget essentially blocks off an entire flanking route, if you use it properly, you place this in the middle of the hallway, the entire hallway is going to be filled with these little spike traps. There's no way, if you want to walk through that the offensive team isn't going to know your exact position. It makes a lot of noise. It does a significant amount of damage if you run through them. I think it's 10 damage per tick, so it adds up pretty quickly. That is going to make flanking and really roaming obsolete when you can place 3 of these things around the map. And while I will admit that when you come across this gadget on defense, it can be very intimidating. You're gonna have to make some noise to be able to dispatch of it. The thing about it though is that it really doesn't take long to be able to deal with this gadget. Now personally, I really love to play as Gridlock, but she has a fair amount of weaknesses. One of them is that it just simply takes a long time for her trap to actually deploy. You need to throw this down on the ground, and then it takes what seems about 10 seconds for it to actually cover the space that you want to cover. I had a lot of moments where I would fling this onto a flank, I would assume that it would be watching my back, and then that person that was waiting in the wings was able to simply swoop on in from behind and take me out. You really have to give it its full like 10 seconds to be able to deploy to give you that kind of security. Even when it is fully deployed though, it doesn't give you a lot of breathing room or protection. Because it only takes 1 round to be able to take one of these traps, all you really need to do with pretty much any weapon on the defensive team is just shoot a straight line, and it gives you an open path to be able to flank the enemy. If that wasn't easy enough though, you could just simply use an impact nade and destroy every single one of her traps, which is usually one of the gadgets that most roamers are going to use. Now the upside of this is that you did just make a lot of noise. If Gridlock didn't place her gadget there, you could have easily snuck in from behind and taken everyone out without them realizing that you were there. But because you did, and it forced you to actually respond to your surroundings, you had to use your weapon that will give them that early warning sign. And so that's one great aspect about her. I just find that it's a little bit too easy to actually dispose and make that clear path. Another big downside of Gridlock is that she is a 3 armored operator. Even if her gadget was incredible, this would be a pretty big downside. The meta of Siege, and really the meta of the game since the very beginning, has been to play as fast operators. The faster you move, the harder a target you are to hit. That's going to improve your survivability, and while yes, you may not have as much health, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day because of that one-shot headshot potential. And while I don't think it's going to make her obsolete, I think many people are going to question why they would want to play as Gridlock when they have Nomad. Nomad has a similar gadget, one that completely takes control away from the character when it activates, but on top of that, she is 2 armor, 2 speed, which is much more appealing for many players. Now, all that being said though, probably the biggest redeeming quality of Gridlock are her weapons. The F90 is incredible. It's quickly become one of my favorite weapons. It hits ridiculously hard. It can practically 3-shot every other operator. It has a pretty fast rounds per minute, so you can get a lot of rounds down range. And on top of that, its recoil is very manageable. You put all of that together, I honestly think that this could be one of the better weapons in the game. I enjoy Nomad, but one of the reasons why I don't find her to be all that interesting is because I just can't get her weapons to work for me. That is not the case for Gridlock, and I could see this being the reason why people would want to choose her over someone like Nomad. And so all in all, I really don't think the concerns about Gridlock are justified, and I don't think she's going to be overpowered whatsoever. If anything, I think she could probably use a bit of an improvement. Maybe make it so that it requires 2 rounds instead of 1 to be able to get through one of her traps. That way it actually acts as more of an obstacle and something that the defense actually has to work around a bit more and can't just light it up in half a second and then run on through. They could even decrease the time it takes for the gadget to fully deploy. Right now it feels like an eternity. Maybe speed up that process so that you're not leaving yourself as vulnerable when you are trying to rely on that to watch your flank. All in all, though, I am very excited for the introduction of these 2 new operators. Their gadgets are simplistic, and I think what I like most about them is that they aren't going to be meta-shifting, game-breaking operators that is going to completely change the way that we play Rainbow Six Siege. Ubisoft has been having this issue where they keep introducing these new characters where it changes the paradigm completely, where now you always have to work around these new abilities and these new gadgets. I think having it where it's a slight change, now you're going to have to think about it slightly slightly differently, it isn't this massive meta shift like we have with like Lion, Ella, and Blackbeard, and I think it's a good thing. Hopefully, they're going to continue to add these kinds of operators in the future, and Mozzie and Gridlock are a great step in that direction. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about these two operators. Do you agree with me? Are you concerned that they're going to be overpowered? Give me your reasons why you think that, or why not, down below in the comments. But yeah, guys, until next time, have a good one, and take it easy.